Most people think that narcissists are so deeply in love with themselves, but this is actually not true. Narcissism comes from deep insecurity, emotional starvation, and feeling unworthy or powerless within. And it comes from childhood as a coping mechanism to deal with the conditions that the people with narcissism had in dysfunctional relational dynamics. So these people never really truly felt seen, heard, understood, or loved. Welcome to the Connection Catalyst podcast, episode 19. My name is Karolina, the Connection Catalyst, and I work with many techniques with subconscious mind to help you connect deeper with yourself, others, and the world around you, and to create and build amazing relationships in this life. So today we're going to talk about narcissism because it's a very common pattern in relationships, and it's very also misunderstood when it comes to how narcissists are seen. So first of all, I want to mention that narcissism is not self-love, because real self-love means when you take care of your needs, when you really respect yourself, when you know your worth, when you take care of your needs and desires, when you are able to value yourself without needing to put anyone else down and dominate others. And narcissism is completely different because at the core, narcissism is a defense mechanism. So then it's like automatic program, and it's a protection against feeling shame or powerlessness or fear. And it's a strategy to avoid feeling weak or abandoned or rejected or unworthy. So, like someone who constantly needs to show their worth, and a man who constantly like chases, for example, success or validation from the outside or admiration by others, having sex with all these different women just to feel good about themselves, and attention from women as well, right? Not because he feels secure, but because he's trying to fill the void. And without those things, he feels empty. That's more of a narcissistic vibe. And this is also relevant for many high performing men whose identity like became built around how much they achieve, around their success, around their image, around their performance, and around their external validation, right? That they are getting by, for example, making more money or having another business or having fifth car, right? So these people like that come from these dysfunctional family dynamics that never felt loved, never felt understood, never really felt worthy for who they are, but maybe only for what they do. And they had conditional love at home, or they were constantly criticized, or they were beaten up and abused emotionally, physically, mentally, right? These people often develop these traits. And I just want to say that under narcissism, there is such a big emotional starvation and so many like limiting beliefs. So they can have internal beliefs like, I am not enough, love has to be earned always, right? I can't rely on people, people are going to hurt me, or the world is completely unsafe, I need to fend for myself because no one will take my needs into account if I don't do it, or if I stop performing, I lose value. And then the person develops the coping strategies to get these emotional resources externally by controlling other people, by overpowering them, by external admiration, as I said, or validation, attention, and so on. So, for example, the man who always needs to be the center of attention, or the smartest in the room, or the most successful, or the most desired, and so on, may secretly feel that he's terrified of being ordinary, for example, right? Or terrified of being imperfect in some way. And many narcissists actually felt very deprived emotionally very early on. So in environments where the parents were very image focused, or as I said, critical, or cold emotionally, right? Or the whole environment was performance based, like for athletes or athletes. or where success was super valued, then this kind of child, let's say a boy, grows up hearing things like, oh, don't be so weak, stop crying, be a man, men don't cry, or you should be more like your brother, or I don't know, you're only valuable when you get a good grade, right? Or, oh, you embarrass me. Then of course the child learns that who I really am is not okay, is not acceptable, is not enough. So then this little boy creates a mask of someone who is confident, overpowering, controlling, and so on. So then it's better for them because the vulnerability and the pain is so big that it doesn't feel safe. So then they develop this protector part, and I spoke about parts work before in the previous episode. So if someone doesn't know what the protector part means, you can go and watch this episode, because when the vulnerability doesn't feel safe, the protector part who wants to take care of this vulnerability and get us out of it, then becomes like a savage, narcissistic, non-empathetic person. But actually, there is vulnerability and there is empathy inside this person. It's just not shown on the outside because the coping mechanism from childhood tells us, no, I can't be weak. I need to overpower. I need to control, because otherwise I will be unsafe. My needs will not be met. So every mechanism of narcissism is based on just the caregivers that didn't give the narcissist what he or she needed in childhood. And so maybe this doesn't excuse their behavior and the manipulation that they do, but at least helps us understand why this happens. And I was in a narcissistic relationship, as I mentioned before. I was a people pleaser, and people pleaser is usually a magnet to a narcissist because it's the same kind of trauma. Both people pleaser that I spoke about in the last podcast episode and narcissist feel unworthy of love and feel somehow powerless, feel that they have a void that they are trying to fill. But their strategy for how they are trying to do it are just opposite. They are mirroring. Because the narcissist wants to overpower and control and be more selfish and focus on themselves because this is how they felt safe. And for people pleaser, they feel like they need to subject to other people, they need to sacrifice themselves, they need to please others, because this is how they fill the void of feeling unworthy. Like in my case, I always needed to prove my worth to my dad because he has been criticizing me, and I never really spent time with him in childhood because he left to, he chose a different family and different woman also than my mom. So I always felt like I'm not enough and I need to prove my worth to my father. So then I kept attracting men that were a confirmation to this belief that I am not worthy of love, because I still kept attracting these unavailable, narcissistic, focused more on themselves than relationship with me people. And then, like, it's not surprise, because in my subconscious beliefs, it was like, oh yeah, of course I'm worthless piece of shit. So I attract men who reflect that and make me feel the exact same way how my father made me feel in childhood, even if he didn't mean to. But that's how it was, right? I took it all personally that there is something wrong with me. So I became a people pleaser to gain love. And then I was a magnet to narcissistic men in various degrees, of course, but that's how it always works. That because it's a polar opposite and the beliefs are kind of aligned and the trauma is similar, it's reflecting in each other, then narcissists and people pleasers are usually coupled up. So narcissism, as I said, is an adaptation. Let's not treat it as anything evil. And even though it cannot be excused because it's very harmful, I personally needed to heal out of the narcissistic abuse for a while. It took me a while because narcissists are super good at manipulating. And I was mentioning about different manipulation tactics in previous podcast episodes as well, so that it's easier for us to see it and then not to be hooked by it. But they often use, for example, intermittent reinforcement that I said also about before, where they give you like such high highs and then low lows and then high highs that you get addicted. And then when you're addicted, you're easier to control. And they're all about control. So unfortunately, because narcissists learn that vulnerability is so dangerous and that emotions are weakness and they shouldn't be weak, and then that people will disappoint you only and hurt you, and connection is so unsafe and so on, and their survival depends on performance and not who I am. Then they disconnect from their vulnerability, and then they become savage. And they can even become very successful, very charismatic, very admired externally, but actually internally, they are completely disconnected. They are suppressed, they are anxious, they are ashamed, and they are emotionally numb, because what they are like showing on the outside is just a mask, is a shell to not feel what's inside. So let's bring some compassion towards narcissists, because they more so than others need our love, because they were so hurt that now they need to be the savage assholes for everyone. And so, yeah. Anyway, so these people struggle with intimacy because, of course, real intimacy requires vulnerability, right? Requires empathy, requires truth, and they completely shut down their empathy because, the empathy and intimacy can feel very threatening with this kind of childhood dynamic, as I said, right? So intimacy would mean being seen, risking being rejected, abandoned, hurt, yeah, losing control, maybe even, and then also maybe exposing the parts that they worked so hard to hide, right? So they don't want to be seen for the vulnerability, because this was not okay in childhood. So instead, they might keep their relationships very surface level, and they might control a lot and avoid the emotional depth and just withdraw emotionally from any kind of deeper relationship, and then seek more admiration from the other people than connection. And for example, a man can be super amazing at seduction or flirting or pursuit and stuff like that, but then when true intimacy begins, he becomes avoidant, distant, critical, or just simply emotionally unavailable. And it could be also with a woman, right? So I also talked about how to stop attracting emotionally unavailable women before. And I explained avoidant and anxious attachment relational dynamics before as well. So especially narcissists are usually avoidance, and then people pleasers are oftentimes anxious in their attachment style. So if you don't know about attachment style, make sure to watch the previous podcast episodes or listen to them. But yeah, the narcissists and people pleasers would attract each other based on this anxious and avoidant dynamic. And like the people pleaser can give narcissists what they need, because they seek validation, they seek admiration, they seek emotional supply somehow, right? Emotional resources that they don't have. And then the people pleaser seeks obviously approval, love, and worthiness, and so on. So the both people unconsciously are trying to make up for and heal their childhood wounds with one another. But then it doesn't really work if they don't heal separately, if they don't go into their own wounds and heal it there inside. So, for example, the woman can be like, oh, if I can finally get this emotionally unavailable man to love me and choose me, I will finally feel worthy. Or I will rescue him and maybe I will make him stop having all these addictions, right? Meanwhile, the narcissistic man on the other side of the spectrum could be like, oh, if this person keeps admiring me, I can finally feel valuable, right? So this creates very toxic and addictive relationship dynamics and can lead to codependency. And I will talk about codependency in further episodes for sure as well, but also it can lead to like people pleaser in this dynamic being emotionally burnt out or exhausted, being anxious, being unseen and feeling really unsafe emotionally, walking on eggshells, or constantly proving their worth. Like I was in this narcissistic dynamic, I constantly try to prove that I'm enough, right? And I'm worthy of love. And then, yeah, for example, like I can bring up to a narcissist something that hurt me as a people pleaser, and then suddenly the conversation becomes about them, and they blame me for the situation because if you didn't did this, I wouldn't act like that. It's like if you didn't, I don't know, bring this to my room that I didn't want, I wouldn't have beaten you. I mean, it's a hardcore example, but you know what I mean. It's like they flip, they become defensive, and then they blame you for the situation. They minimize your feelings. They can gaslight you and use all the manipulation techniques that I talked about before in the previous episodes, and they make you question your reality. They make you doubt your own sense of self. So, in a people pleaser, this can create massive self doubt, self criticism, and confusion over time, especially. So, in a relationship with a narcissist, like we almost lose ourselves. And sometimes we end up not knowing who we are after this kind of relationship ends. And because they are so good at manipulating, then they can cut us off from friends and family, and then we end up with nobody. This was my case. And they do it step by step. So they usually are very amazing at the beginning, and then step by step, they are testing the boundaries that you have, So at the beginning, for me, when I was manipulated by a narcissist, it was like he was so good and loving and kind and whatever. And then step by step, he made me cut off from friends and family. He made me have different habits. He made me dress up or act as he wanted. And he was constantly testing how far he can go with his manipulation and how obedient I would be. And of course, I didn't last long in a romantic relationship like this because I'm a rebel at heart, but it was like gradual. It's like testing, 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 and you don't even realize when you're completely wrapped around a narcissist's finger. So, yeah, and it all stems from very low self-worth beneath the narcissistic mask, right? Because externally, these people can seem confident, charismatic, so ambitious, or they might have high status and so on, which to me, this narcissist seemed like that. But internally, they feel shameful, they are scared of rejection, they feel powerless, they feel empty emotionally, they feel deep insecurity, actually. So, which is why the external success alone rarely satisfies them for long. And no amount of money, success, status, or sexual attention or achievements actually can fully heal this wound of unworthiness and emotional deprivation. One more thing that I want to mention is if you are empathetic, if you're an empath, you are going to be a magnet to narcissists. Or if you're a people pleaser, right? And then we, as people pleasers, I said we because I'm also, or I was one of them, we try to heal the other person. We try to love them out of their narcissism. We feel like, okay, if I love them enough, they will change. My love will be magic, like in Disney movies, it will heal everything. But it's not going to. If they don't want to change, they are not going to change because, like, they have a coping mechanism, a shell around their heart that you probably don't have access to. They have so many gates that you don't have keys to, with their heart closed off behind so many walls that they need to genuinely want help in order to change. They need to take responsibility. They need to face their shadow, face their shit, and become self aware. And they need to just be willing to face a pain, which they are usually not. And because they don't really have authority in you as a people pleaser, because they feel like they are in control and so on, the cycle will just repeat if they don't decide to change. And it's hard because most of them don't. That's why, as people pleasers, we can only decide what we are going to do about it as empaths and someone who is attracting these kind of people into our lives. So it's so important to have self-respect, to know your boundaries, to know your needs, to know your desires, to be honest about your needs, and to not abandon ourselves for the sake of connection, especially with the narcissist, right? So instead of rescuing someone, savior complex, we all know that, instead of over explaining yourself, instead of tolerating when you're disrespected or over giving to someone who doesn't give you back, just see if this relationship dynamic is fulfilling me, is feeding me, is healthy for me. And if not, just quit or change. And you don't need to question, like, is this person a narcissist? But question yourself, if you feel like you could be with a narcissist, it's like, how do I feel around them? Do I keep my boundaries in place? Can I fully be myself in this relationship? Am I authentic? Am I respected in my emotions, right? Or am I constantly earning love? Or am I just naturally receiving it? Or do I feel safe emotionally with this person? Or do I abandon myself to keep the connection, right? And it might be hard because sometimes the answer could be yes, I abandon myself. And if we want to get out of these patterns, whether it's narcissist or people pleasing, we need to work with our childhood trauma. We need to work with our beliefs about the world, about the relationships. And I can help with that. I work with subconscious mind. So whether it's belief work with the psyche modality, or whether it's trauma work, whether it's parts work that I talked about before in the previous episodes, I can help with that. And it's about really getting to the origins of the patterns and where this coping mechanism of narcissism or people pleasing, is just the flip polarity, was created, and then rewiring it rewiring it in our body so that we don't react based on our automatic nervous system response, but we can be aware and change in our relational dynamics. And so if someone is interested to know more, you can go to my website, karolinakuraj.com, Karolina with K, Kuraj.com, and find the contact and all the modalities that I work with there. Because if you find yourself being a narcissist or being with a narcissist, it's such a toxic dynamic that it needs to change if you want to have healthy relationships and connection with yourself and others. So if you feel like you need support with getting out of these patterns, contact me. And if you feel like some of your friends might be willing to listen to this episode and get more awareness about these patterns because they might be in these unhealthy toxic dynamics themselves, make sure to send them over. And of course, if you like what I'm creating here, you like my vibe, please make sure to subscribe or like or ask any questions in the comments. I would be really grateful for it because, yeah, I'm doing it also for you to get more awareness about yourself and about these patterns. So if you like it, make sure to leave a mark after yourself. And yeah, to sum up, I just want to say that true healing is really learning how to receive love, not from trying to prove and trying to get it from emotionally unavailable people. True healing is just to learn where we don't abandon ourselves in the process of trying to be loved. So let's be unconditionally loving, both towards ourselves and towards the narcissists, because narcissists need our love more than anyone else. Even if we don't want to be in relationship with them because they are too much for us and they control us and they manipulate us and so on, let's remember that these people are actually the most wounded ones. That's why they need the most compassion, the most love from us. And let's just do our best to practice that with self-care and without self-sacrificing for anyone, taking care of ourselves first, and also then taking others as a part of us. Thank you so much for listening and for being here with me. Until the next episode.